So I'm currently the Associate Professor at the Birmingham Leadership Institute, and we have developed, and I spent a little time putting this into your context, we developed a master's programme which is seen as quite innovative in the UK, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, but it's around systems thinking and leadership practice. So hopefully that gives you a bit of context of the being that is bringing this to you, and therefore the context that this is in. So just finish up the conversation that was happening at the end of yesterday. You were talking about the context of Norway, of Canada, and systems thinking in government and its development. So in the UK, probably looks quite good actually at the minute from the outside. We have a new government that's really interested in systems thinking, and we have a civil service that over the last couple of years has become really interested in systems thinking and has developed even a number of toolkits for implementing systems thinking in policy process and policy practice. And actually another area I've worked in a lot is with the civil service in Wales and in England. And they've been through various kind of iterations of behaviour change, participatory working, and now they're really moving towards systems thinking. But, and this is something that some of you alluded to yesterday, I think, is that the toolkit includes a lot of methodologies, a lot of systems thinking methodologies that I'm sure some of you are aware of. And the feedback, they've got a kind of network of 800 civil servants working with systems thinking in the UK government. And the feedback they're giving is they can't implement. They mostly can't work with these processes because they're far too convoluted, they require too much time. They were developed probably at a time where that was a lot more possible to use those methodologies. So now there's a big interest in what they can do to do a kind of everyday systems thinking. How does everyday systems thinking, what does it look like? So what I'm going to present to you here is also speaking to that. How do we develop a systems way of working that can be used in the UK civil service, in civil service and in practice generally? And so I've done this presentation to the civil service, particularly to DEFRA, but to other departments, and they're really interested in the work I'm going to present to you now. So I'm engaged in a number of conversations with them around this. And as they said, we have developed our own masters, systems thinking and leadership practice, and this masters is very much based and linked to a master's level apprenticeship, which the government introduced a few years ago. It's a new apprenticeship, and it's a way of getting funding for a master's level programme, but it's also a qualification in itself, the apprenticeship, which is very applied. It also includes a few too many of those methodologies in the apprenticeship, that possibly I would like. But one thing to say is we specifically link leadership and systems practice, because we see the implementation of systems practice as challenging, often, as you described, there's a lot of resistance, it's something different. So we see leadership practice as part of systems practice, and systems practice as leadership practice, really. So what we're doing is developing systems capabilities to support leadership practice, and we specifically talk about leadership practice because, as I'm sure a lot of you here, we're interested in distributed leadership practice. And we work a lot with how then we evolve people, how we help people to develop we draw a bit on adult development work, for those of you who know it. How can we create and develop people, create conditions where people can develop in order to see and work with more complexity, which the adult development piece speaks to. And I mean, this is the headline really. It appears to be working. We've had 2 cohorts. I mean, as I go on, you'll see my own confirmation bias here, but the students are being actually really, really positive about it. So our student feedback is our approach is transformative, so they didn't expect this development work in the way that we've delivered it. They thought they were just going to come and learn some methodologies. But they're saying it is allowing them to apply systems thinking more easily and have different and more effective conversations. So it really speaks to what we've got here, I think. Okay, so let's look at what this is. I'm aware there's a bit to get through here. So we have, Gerald, and in the Masters we use this systems, what is a system? And I think Micah had something similar yesterday, isn't it? And in the late, when we're talking about the waves, systems waves, as the history of systems thinking kind of went forward, as you all know, I'm sure, we started to include perspective, this perspective, and this perspective, seeing the system, creating the system, and the perspective in the system. Kind of put simply, really, the fourth wave is thinking about the human system, the human perceptual system. What do we understand about the perceptual system and how humans make sense of the world? What do we know about that, and how can that inform and develop our systems practice? Now, Gerald, so this is very much Gerald's work, working with Cabrera, developed some systems, 4 basic systems thinking kind of concepts. And I think we were saying yesterday, that you look in different places, you get a different set of principles, a different set of concepts. These are the 4 concepts based on the systems map that they developed as a kind of metacognitive thinking skills that would take you in or give you an approach that was usable, that is usable for a systems thinking approach. These then link, and I'm going to quickly go through that. These link you in potentially to the use of the methodologies. So the classic 4 methodologies which are presented in the UK are, critical systems heuristics, systems dynamics, soft systems methodologies, viable systems modelling. These are kind of the old classics, as I might call them, as the methodologies. But these are the methodologies that people find very effective when they can use them as a whole process, but they're largely not able to use them as a whole process. So what we end up with, in summary, is a set of concepts that can be used as concepts, as principles, as thinking tools on their own, but that can also draw from methodologies, understanding the strengths of the different methodologies. So that's, we could spend the day or 2 days or a few days going through that, but what I'm going to move us on to is this human perceptual system. So our social and economic structures are a product as a way of thinking. That will not be a surprise to anybody in the room, I'm sure. And that can be a basis for systems thinking, and in fact is the basis for a lot of systems thinking. And I think when I was doing my research, this really struck me. The human perception system is not designed to see reality. Now again, people in the room might go, yeah, I get that. But the question is, what is it designed to do? What is the neurobiology of our perceptive system? How does it actually work? What are these mechanisms? So that became my interest. And what I want to move on to is asking you, what do you know about the neurobiology of your own mind? So that in the last day, people, and in the talks that have gone before, there's been people talking about cognition, emotion, all of these things, meaning-making, sense-making. So what I want you to do is just turn to the person next to you, or a couple of people next to you, and just reflect on that question, just for a couple of minutes. Really just for a workshop and not a 45-minute. I'm not really good. Yeah, like, I'm sure it's usual practice to do this kind of thing. Anyway, give me a flavour. We've got a bit to get through, but a flavour of what came out of that. Just somebody just try to be succinct, but what kind of things came out of that?
We were talking about how the brain is pre-programmed for a lot of things.
Pre-programmed.
Already, like Samantha said, for example, that when someone throws a ball at you, your brain sort of reacts to the fact that it thinks that the ball will hit you, or that's like the trajectory of the ball coming even before the person maybe throws it. Also, an example of saying the wrong answer to what's the capital of France, and instead of saying Paris, you immediately start thinking about another city, not car. You know, you can say anything. You can say chair, table, whatever. But it's pre-programmed Sorry.
Fires together, sticks together.
Well, fires together, that sticks together. Neuroplasticity.
So if you have an association that's stronger than necessarily less logic.
So related to associations, yeah.
Okay.
Anybody wants to throw anything else at me?
The most obvious experience I know about neurobiology. Yeah. Okay. I will walk very loud. Building on what Ilana said, the matrix, which actually shows that part of our neurobiology is wiring evolution. So we're actually deeply related to nature, and our responses are. And on the other hand, we talked about experiences from our youth that also filter our experiences now. So there's if you talk about AI and this kind of technology, then it doesn't filter. And we are filtering basing on what we know and what we have perceived even as a child. You mentioned the leaking of the windows.
Leaking of the windows?
Yeah, something that's attached. Yeah. So part of it is in evolution and how we evolved, and part of it is what we have experienced.
Okay, great. This is really okay. They're very. What you've just said there is very usual kinds of answers, and I wonder when you think about where you've got that information from, where you are, your source in terms of how you're understanding psychology or neuroscience, where that source is. We'll just reflect on that, maybe reflect a little bit more on it in a moment. But what you, I think, have spoken a little to is this kind of model. I heard the word reaction, I heard the word filtering. So what most of us believe, what you see in our language, what you hear in our language, and actually in the design of what we do, is most of us generally really see our minds as a kind of stimulus response machine that filters information according to prior experience and bias. Okay, so this is far too simplistic. It's far, far too simplistic, and is essentially, in the way that some of these things are, wrong, really. And there's principles here that are incorrect. So why do we have ideas in our mind about our own mind that are not correct? And I started to look at this because I was like, why is this? Why when you ask people, why do we have so little understanding about how our own minds work? And I think it's worth just reflecting on this. But the mind sciences have been late to develop. Basically, it wasn't long ago that people thought thinking was just in the heart. And I know we talk about this mind-heart connection, and there's something there. But we literally thought thinking was in the heart because that's where the felt sense of thinking appeared to be originally. Because how do you work out how you think? How do you scientifically work that out? Aristotle, you have to intuit it. You have to intuit your own mind. You know, you can't see it, so you have to intuit it. And Aristotle intuited that we had like 3 ventricles in the mind, and we had like animal spirits that moved from the mind out to the body to help it behave. So this is kind of the history. We've got people like Freud, who obviously attempted to understand the mind by talking to people who were dysfunctional within the terms of society anyway, and worked theories out in those terms. So it wasn't until quite late on that we were able to cut up bodies, and we were able to kind of actually see what was inside a body. And you come across this pink stuff and all these, how do you work out what this does? Really hard. So one question I ask, kind of staying on the same topic but maybe going off for a little moment, is why did we think the sun went round the earth? Because that's what it looked like. So the argument I would say is that the way we understand our own minds is largely based on our experience of our minds and little scraps of psychology that we might have picked up. So in the UK, and certainly in Spain, most places I go, whilst most people have studied basic physics, chemistry, biology at school, no one has studied anything about psychology. In the UK, you would have studied something, well, post-16, you can do a psychology A-level. Most people wouldn't know. So nobody has studied any psychology, the basic of psychology or neuroscience or anything to do with their own mind. So why do we think? So what was it that enabled us to see something different in terms of the sun going around the earth? Huh? Technology. What? So what was? New, yeah. What this thing? Something which enabled us to see something we couldn't see with our embodied perception. We're not designed to see the galaxies, the universe in that way, which enabled us to take measurements, which enabled us to see that our intuitions were wrong. So I compare this to the brain scanner. And I ask people, at what point, when did the brain scanner come into common use? '50? So what, that's like 1980s, so 1970s, much later than that. Hundreds, huh? Mid-90s. Who said mid-90s? The winner is. Well done, no prize, but. The mid-90s, not till the mid-90s that you could see the mind in action, a live brain in action in a body. So that might tell us why we don't all have these kind of knowledges. It's not like common knowledge, because even though that doesn't actually tell you what's happening, in the same way the telescope doesn't actually tell you what's happening, it gives you an insight that you couldn't see, we can't see, that goes beyond our intuitions, let's say. So what some people were saying is that as a result of that, our own intuitions of our own minds are showing to be fundamentally flawed. And science is showing that almost everything we think, everything we know about our operations of our own mind, our intuitive introspections needs to be abandoned wholesale. Now, I think this is really interesting in terms of systems thinking and systems design, because the fundamental understanding of what thinking is quite key then. And if there's been a paradigm shift, then we really need to understand how this might impact how we're working and what we're understanding to be happening and what our practice is. So this is Anil Seth. You'll find him easily on the internet, and he's got a great TED talk that talks about the mind basically being predictive rather than reactive, so the mind being generative. And what he says is that what we're seeing is a controlled illusion. The way we create our reality is a controlled illusion. Now, of course, what I'm presenting to you now is not the truth. It is a moment in time where debates around what the mind is are debates, and people are debating, neuroscientists are having conversations about this. But what interests me is how often we're not, as systems thinkers, we're not engaging even with these debates, which have identified huge paradigm shifts that are not in any way represented in the discipline. So so let's look at the predictive mind, what we're saying here. So the predictive mind, some of you might know some of this, will say that we do not see what's out there. The world's not coming in wholesale. There isn't a reality out there that's coming in wholesale. Our eyes, our peripheral vision literally does not pick up, even though it seems to pick up a whole picture. We know